This tale is called Cars on My Street. This is number 2, based in Royal Road, Sutton Coldfield, West Midlands. You may or may not know that I, in similar fashion to many children, had 2 homes throughout my childhood and adolescence. The reason for my dwelling duo being that weekdays I was a privately fostered child, and at the weekends I stayed with my birth mum, meaning 2 completely different families, living by 2 different sets of rules, 2 different sets of friends and neighbours, and of course 2 different sets of resident cars. My mum's road, Royal Road, Sutton Coldfield, was not a particularly regal affair. A mixture of dwellings built, with one exception, between the 1900s and 1930s, its head teeing off the busy Coleshill Road and its tail ambling nonchalantly into council stock-lined Jerome Road, with a stunted spur known as Kathleen Road creating a shortcut out and away to the right. The left-hand side, which included my home, was blocked by a tall railway embankment carrying the Sutton Park line past the back of the houses. It's actually a wonder I didn't become a dyed-in-the-wool railway enthusiast. A road of mixed fortunes brought with it an excellent mix of cars during the 1970s, although by no means all of the households were car owning at the time, and only visiting cars parked in the street, which gave us children a broad vista, even if we weren't allowed to cross the road on our own. Next door to my mother's postage stamp sized 3-bedroom semi, on the other side of a much knuckle-wrapped wall, lived the Everetts. Mr. Everett passed away at the start of the 70s, but Mrs. Everett, I never knew her name actually, but her of the ever so sensitive ears, and their daughter Rosemary, kept for many years the little hearing aid beige 1953-ish Hillman Husky that Mr. Everett once drove so proudly, finally selling it to our gruff neighbour Paul on the other side of the house in the mid-1980s as a little used classic, which I believe remained mouldering in his garage until his own demise decades later. Paul spent much of the 70s nursing his other car, a somewhat temperamental white Triumph TR6, out on occasional outings. But again, it didn't see much action, and, kept on the drive, began to rust prodigiously. Before Paul's arrival, Pauline and Sam Deere had lived there, first with a 1966 deregistered Austin, pronounced Austin, 1100, which was then replaced by a similar Mark II version in the same white livery. Cars were in short supply downwards down the road on our side, there being the Hicks family with JJW 251D, a rather fine Triumph 2000, and a trendy looking couple with an early 70s Mazda estate of small proportions, carrying the distinctive personal plate 1LOL, which I always read as ILOL. I bet that would be worth a bit now. Across the road, in the exception to the rule 1950s and 60s bungalow, was entrepreneurial builder Bill Packer and his wife Helen, with a substantial and imposing blue and grey Rover P5B coupe, perhaps in many ways the finest car on the street. It was certainly very new when it arrived. He also had a transit van in which he kindly transported me and my drums to an early gig. Thanks, Bill. I'm not sure if you're still around, mate. There was a dearth of cars heading up towards Coleshill Road on the other side of the street, save for a young professional couple and their Datsun 100A, the Aston family with an exotic Simca estate, and the Turnbulls with a fine-looking Mark II Ford Consul. Resident at one of the fine large houses at the very far end of the street were 2 MGA coupes, neither of which I ever saw on the road, but the owner often confided in me his wish to restore them. Such classics were only just then beginning to become appreciated. Back to our side of the road and working towards home again, saw the other house I was most familiar with, number 17 Royal Road, where my chums Peter and Robert Holmes lived, along with their parents Ted and Irene, and numerous older siblings, vis-a-vis Lisa, Ricky, Johnny, Barbie and Billy. The first family car I recall them owning was a Vauxhall Viva HB, which was replaced in 1973-74 by a Morris Marina 1.8 in red, by which time crush loading had been alleviated by the fledging of the older siblings or their graduation to powerful early Japanese or British motorbikes. I only remember one ride in the Marina to an early bus and steam rally, probably at Tyseley, Birmingham in 1974. Most of the time, us rowdy boys could be found using our rat run at the foot of the railway bank or braving our way through the undergrowth to the unfenced line where we could experience earth tremors as heavy diesels plodded by, pulling freight, and only freight, high above our gardens, guards waving to us from their cosy looking brake vans. Almost back home, next to the Holmeses, was a pale yellow Vauxhall Victor FB, a car I was never very fond of, followed by an Arrow Series Hillman Hunter at number 21. Thoroughly modern couple, Madeline and Colin at number 23, had, or perhaps it was their predecessors, a Manx cat-like bobtail Ford Zephyr Mark IV for a while. Finally, at number 25, a little seen, cosseted, 1967 registered Mark I Ford Cortina Estate was resident. At my mum's house during the 1970s, no car was ever resident. But in the 1980s, I was about to put that right.